Welcome to Choose Views with Richard Chew.
Get ready to dive into a world of insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions.
As progressives, our job is to have an all-inclusive, full-on assault with all of our players.
A show that will focus on moving our political, social, economic, gender, and cultural conversation forward.
And all of our players means all of our players.
It's Choose Views. And now, here's your host, Richard Chew.
Good Monday morning, progressives, and welcome to the January 13th, not Friday the 13th, Monday the 13th, 2025 edition of Choose Views, 773-763-9278, Facebook Live, Twitter stream, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, iHeart. Yep, that's where you can find us. Email me at richard@WCPT820.com. Catch all of our shows by subscribing to our WCPT podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify. There you can get Choose Views, short version, long version. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, driving it home with Patty Vasquez, and The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath, our weekend shows out Chicago and other shows and interviews. Always great stuff there. Check out our digital signal, heartlandsignal.com, our digital platform, I should say, and enjoy the lots of good stuff that's there that you can share with your folks. So there's one thing I'm going to good to be back, good to be here Monday morning. Right out of the gate, for those of you who are commuting today, it's cold out. And there's a little bit of wind, so I think the temperature right now is 11 degrees. The high today is 21. It may be a little bit warmer in certain areas, but just in the region right now, if you're commuting by car, go start that bad boy up a little bit earlier. Devin and I were just talking about that a moment ago. If you haven't moved your car over the weekend, it's probably snow on it. Go clear it off now. And start your car. You know the drill with me. Also, if you're commuting by bus, by train, by cab, anything, please, y'all, if you're going to be standing out there in the bus, have the earmuffs, the head wrap, the scarf, the gloves, and don't be on your phone. There is nothing. There can't be, unless you get an emergency call from a family member. Devin, there's nothing. I love you, dude. Respect you even more. There is no way in hell I'm having a phone call with somebody, even you. If I'm standing out waiting for a cab, waiting for the bus, waiting for the train, I'm just going to stand there and wait for it to arrive, right? Unless you send me a 911 and I'm like, something's up, I need to talk to Devin. So, folks, put your phone in your purse, your pocketbook, your even in your bag, whatever. Just don't be on your phone while you're waiting for the bus, to train, the cab, or your friend to pick you up. When you get inside of the vehicle that's transporting you from A to B, then if you want to get on your phone, that's okay. But don't be out there letting the wind whip through and suddenly you get cold and you drop. I can really dramatize this. Devin's got that little smirk on his face like, where's Richard going with this? So all I'm saying, guys, is as I do on these crazy weather days, please be careful. Please be safe. If you're in the upper Midwest, it's cold no matter pretty much where you are. Here in Chicago, for sure. If you're in Detroit, Minneapolis, Indianapolis, Des Moines, Milwaukee, it's cold. So please, Cleveland, Akron, don't want to leave anybody out, get anybody upset. That's, some of our folks. But I just want to drill that in to please be careful this morning with regard to commuting in this weather. So there you have it. I want to share a fun one with you right out of the gate before we hit the Choose News Views. We have this clip that Devin and I put together, and I'm calling it. It's kind of fun, and it just kind of puts a little bit of lightheartedness into this crazy time we're having right now, certainly with the weather. But this young lady posted this regarding the weather in Kentucky. Y'all listen to this.
New York City, Chicago, Philly, D.C., y'all weather is lost. We found it in Kentucky. You can come on, pick it up right now. There's no reason that I should have on a fur hat in Kentucky. Louisville? Absolutely not. Come on and pick your weather up. It's going to be out on the curb. I don't need it. We don't need it. What is shoveling snow? Huh? Absolutely not. Ridiculous. Couldn't be us. Come pick it up now.
Yeah, I saw that and thought, she's right. And I'll for the purposes of the humor and the smile and to see her walking with, as she said, with the fur hat on. Here's the best part about that. At least she has a fur hat to put on, to know that in Kentucky, in Louisville, where she lives, apparently. She needed to be prepared, so she knew to be prepared. But the weather is cold right now. It's January. It's supposed to be cold in some areas. It's going to be cooler pretty much anywhere you go. Even if you're in Florida, it's a little bit cooler than it would be. So I'm just saying, everybody, please be careful today wherever you are. And if your weather is impacting you in a different way, then please be careful. And we're going to talk about what's happening to our loved ones and friends and associates in Southern California. Also, some shout outs to the people that are in the Southeast and areas where they've got, like she just said, snow that is not the norm. That's the greater conversation around climate change, which we're going to be having, and the impacts of that certainly over the next 4 years, because this incoming administration is not a believer in climate change. They're in fact deniers and surrounding themselves with people who are further deniers of climate change and global warming. And as I like to call it, the tilting of the axis. Now, so we're going to talk about that, but I'm also going to kind of move the conversation along from some of the things that we talked about last week. But there's some serious points I want to make, and there's some helpful points that I want to make as we navigate and go forward with what's happening in Southern California. And to that end, with regard to our daily Choose Views news, we'll talk about a few things that are happening in the state of California. Governor Gavin Newsom did sign an executive order yesterday lifting requirements for rebuilding after the Los Angeles fires, which he said could be the country's costliest natural disaster. The death toll did climb to 16 per the LA County Medical Examiner. Firefighters have so far kept the largest blaze from reaching homes in Brentwood and crossing the Interstate 405. But more than 40,000 acres have burned and more than 12,000 structures have been destroyed. Police, unfortunately, have arrested suspected looters. I noticed how they changed that to suspected looters in certain areas around the fires. In other Choose Views news items, Kohl's CEO takes blame for results. What do we mean by that? In an unusual move, according to the Wall Street Journal, outgoing Kohl's CEO Tom Kingsbury acknowledged mistakes that contributed to a 9.3% sales decline in their most recent quarter. Those included pulling back on popular store brand offerings, fine jewelry, and petite clothing sizes with the intention of streamlining operations. But the strategy backfired, alienating some shoppers. Some of the chain's challenges, such as inflation and competition, predate Kingsbury, who is set to step down later this month after less than 2 years in the role. He'll be replaced by Michael's chief, Ashley Buchanan. So that's probably a smart move, given that large sales decline. Apple is defending its diversity policies. Apple pushed back against shareholder proposals aimed at abolishing the company's diversity initiative, calling it an inappropriate attempt to micromanage the company's programs and policies. Apple's board defended its inclusion policies in a proxy filing ahead of its annual shareholder conference, noting that it has a well-established compliance program to guard against any potential legal challenges. The move comes as fellow tech giants Meta and Amazon scale back their DEI programs. So you know what I have to say about that. I'm not a big Apple product person because it confuses the hell out of me sometimes. It's like my brain goes, ugh. I do have an iPad thanks to my wife, but good on them for standing standing confidently in that space is how I'll put it. JP Morgan blocks comments on RTO. Now, this was an interesting one. The JP Morgan disabled employee meaning they disabled, not disabled employees. So they made the move to, let's change that up a little bit based on how I wrote this. They made the move to disable employee comments on an internal website after dozens criticized the bank's 5-day return to office policy, according to the Wall Street Journal and Barron's report, citing anonymous sources. And among the concerns cited, commuting costs, childcare, and work-life balance. At least one employee suggested a union. Surprise, surprise. You could see that coming. JP Morgan says the policy sets to begin in March is the best way to run the company. While acknowledging it might not be popular, companies including Amazon are facing similar pushback. How do they? What evidence do they have that's the best way to run their company? Their profits have been, not just J.P. Morgan. I'm not leaning in on them, but this is the article that I wrote. Devin, how do they know it's the best way to run the company? It's been successful, but during COVID, what a lot of companies learned is that they can still be highly profitable, successful, profitable, and all the rest if they're a public company with folks having a hybrid work environment. So how do they know it's better? Anyhow, that sounds like, a Big Daddy telling everybody, we know what's better. Maybe not. There's a hiring surge that did take place in December. Thank you, President Biden and the administration, and all the coordination with other parts of the U.S. economy, which added 256,000 jobs in December, the most in 9 months, reinforcing the view that the Federal Reserve won't lower interest rates anytime soon. Non-farm payrolls rose faster last month than in November. The Bureau of Labor reports statistics were reported on Friday, pointing to a still robust labor market. The unemployment rate edged down to 4.1%. Golly. But y'all hate President Biden and hate Vice President Harris. Overall jobs increased by 2.2 million last year, slower than in 2023, but still above the pre-pandemic 2 million of 2019. So that means that the Republicans, the maggots, who want to say that this job growth and success of the Biden administration was only bounced back from COVID, even many of those in the mainstream media, either you are lying or you're stupid, because that 2.2 to 2 million is higher, and that's pre-pandemic comparison. So it's not, that can't be bounced back in any event. I'd like to read and, know the numbers on that space. Okay. Here's one for you, Devin. Refer a stranger, collect some cash. While external applicants have a 1 in 200 shot in landing a job at various companies, those odds skyrocket to 1 in 25 with the referral from a current employee. This is fueling an underground market in which workers get paid by strangers and by their employers for successful referrals, according to Bloomberg. Apps that facilitate this practice know it's legal, but some employers warn that it could kill off referral programs altogether. See, something succeeds and they got to tarnish it and mess with it. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. The number is 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we will be right back.
Good morning. You're waking up with Richard Chew.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
We're live and ready to hear from you. Text or call us now at 773-763-9278. Same number. Simple as that. Let's get the conversation going on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. All right, so I said I was going to talk a little bit about what's happening with our folks that are dealing with the wildfires and folks that are dealing with just all the processes of that, which is just awful. First thing I want to say is I'm going to throw this out and then come back to it probably later in the show. But I've seen a lot of vitriol from folks on the right about how the folks in Southern California and the leaders in California in general, specifically Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor of Los Angeles Karen Bass, have been, the vitriol coming from the right and some week A reporting and some things that people are just posting because they've got some anecdotal situations out there, and how even the incoming elected 34 times convicted felon has been, doing what he does. There's a couple thoughts that I want to share with regard to this. Unfortunately, what my concern is as we go forward as a country is that when these things happen, and they will happen again, we will have other national. Listen, during President Biden's administration, there's been flooding, there's been rain, there's been storms, there's been all the things that have happened in large part, because of climate change and a warming climate. We know that's a huge part of this. the Republicans just need to, for lack of better words, they have an automatic, easy button to point to say that the Democratic Party didn't do or a Democratic leader didn't do, fill in the blanks. So this isn't the first time this has happened in the last year with the flooding, the rains of flooding, the hurricanes of storms that took place in the Southeast. What was the first thing the Republicans lied about? They lied about the fact that FEMA wasn't doing any work. They weren't doing anything. They were helping the immigrants. They started telling those lies, and Fox News was right out in front. And any other of the media on the right, they just ran with it. And elected officials did the same doggone thing. And so the first thing that they do is, and this is what's happening, unfortunately, with these horrible fires in Southern California, is that they start blaming and saying the Democrats didn't do this, Democrats didn't do that, the Democratic leader didn't do this, the Democratic leader didn't do that, without even addressing the reality that we have a climate change issue that's impacting all of us. I'm going to talk about this first, and then I'm going to pivot to something that I will call it being positive or forward thinking. But I first have to lay the groundwork and say this. This is the Republican playbook. It's not taking responsibility. It's blaming. That's who they've been. And I can go back to Reagan. Reagan blamed social issues on black folks. And, the whole conversation around welfare clean, just on and on. Republicans have, since Reagan, in my lifetime and even, I could go further back because my political lifetime goes back to when I was a kid. But I want to try to make the point as concise and salient as I can. So, the fires, Trump started blaming. Republicans started blaming. The flooding and the issues that took place in the central Southeast, that's the first thing they started doing, is saying that FEMA wasn't doing their, once again. And so it's troubling. It's troubling is not the right word because I want to sound like Mitt Romney. It pisses me off that when these things happen, that the Democratic Party, response time is sometimes slow, which is a punch back and say something along these lines, which is what I would hope more Democratic leaders would do rather than just taking the hit, but throwing one back. And that's this. The Trump blaming, the Republicans blaming, the media blaming. Where were you when Trump fumbled COVID? I'm just curious. Where were you when people died en masse during COVID? And he denied it. We have him on record. We have him on a recording of saying this stuff is awful. It's going to be painful. And then he lied about it, and y'all sat back and believed in it, didn't call him out on it readily, daily. And then you turn around and you reelect him when people, if we want to split the math on it and say that half the folks died on Joe Biden's watch and half on Trump's watch, the difference between the people that died on President Biden's watch, which is not real, those numbers are wrong. I'm just trying to have a conversation around blame, or not blame, but responsibility. One dude lied about it, one dude didn't. And the person that didn't lie about it handily said, we're going to fix this as quickly as we can if y'all get the hell out of the way on a state level and let us help you. There weren't any Biden supporters and Biden team that were denying that masks were going to help, that were denying that vaccines were going to be helpful. That came from Trump and his administration and his state partners in terms of government leaders in Republican states. That's a fact. So, where were the complainings and the yellings and all the finger pointings when it came to COVID? We're not talking about something that happened 40 years ago. This happened 4 years ago. This is in our current lifetime. It's impacted all of us. I get a heavy cough and I think, do I have COVID? I get a scratchy throat. Devin and I both have allergies like nobody's business. We start scratching and whatnot, and we're thinking, okay, what the hell? That's the truth. Devin and I, he can pop on the mic and tell you whenever he and I both get a scratchy throat in the studio, look at each other like, you ain't got COVID, do you? And I'm making light of it only in the sense that this is where Democrats have to punch back with content on all levels. Okay, the reason that Chicago and the greater state of Illinois and the surrounding communities didn't have as awful as an experience in dealing with this is because our leaders got together. I talked to fortunate to have Mayor Johnson on last Friday, and as much as I told him, I'm gonna criticize you, I'm gonna compliment you, in the same sentence sometimes. But one of the things that they did, meaning Mayor Johnson and I just lost her name. I can see her. Ms. Preckwinkle, the governor, Pritzker, and even the previous mayor of Chicago did is they got together and they said, how are we going to fix this? How are we going to work together to make sure that things move in a solid direction? That's coming together to make sure that these things get resolved. But on a federal level, no. Any of the disasters that took place during the Trump administration started with the blame and then a determination as to who might get support, who might get the largesse and the power of the federal government to help when it comes to a disaster. Trump's team did not step up. They did not. I don't care what anybody says. Anybody that's a troll that wants to call or text or email me, you got to prove to me that they did, because they sure as hell did not. PPE equipment where states were having to buy it themselves. Governor Pritzker was smart enough to go around the Trump administration to make sure that we had working equipment and working and masks that were real and not we're going to wither away. So don't talk to me about what the Democratic leadership isn't doing or hasn't done when it comes to disasters. We've stepped up. Going back to, a good example, and this was sent to me over the weekend. A good example is look at the Katrina response. And we can shift the conversation into the insurance companies looking awful right now. State Farm, and as an example of all the policies that ironically, I'm not going to go down I could, but I'm not going to on this show go down the conspiracy route in terms of what happened and how it happened and what's being done and not being done. But at the end of the day, the country just decided to reelect the dude that was at the tip of the spear when it came to navigating COVID, and he fumbled it times 1,000. He messed with our partnership with the Paris Accords. He messed with, let's be honest. We want to talk about COVID. Former President Obama and his administration had tools in place to help with a biological national disaster. And what did Trump do? Y'all know what he did. Or didn't do, depending on how you want to look at it. So don't come to me with this quote-unquote garbage when we have at its base a climate change issue that is affecting all of us. And a responsible person will do the after-action report to find out what happened with regard to the arresting of the fires and preventing them from spreading as fast as they did. But one of the key things, and y'all can be upset with me all day about it, is climate impacted this in a major way. And it's affecting us in other ways, in other places in the country. It's just that the fires have been so quickly destructive. So I want to see more of our Democratic leaders step up and fight back and say, you're the same dude that made it worse, that made COVID worse. And nobody talking about that. Okay? So just understand that that's where I'm coming from on this. That's where I'm coming from. I really believe that our climate change we have to stop denying that. And I know that, I got off on this last week because if we don't talk about it, then we're doing the same thing that we've done before. It's like, okay, it'll pass. Let's not talk about it. No, this is like right now, next week, they're going to swear in this dude who lied to the country, lied to the world, has stolen, has cheated, has done all the things that we're told we're not supposed to do and gotten away with it by all measure. And this week A conviction or sentencing last week, if Devin and I went down the street and robbed the Walgreens and they got us on tape doing that, we're going to jail. We're not going to get no. So stop lying to yourself, America. Climate change is real. We're about to swear in a guy who doesn't believe in climate change. And if he does believe in it, it's in private, which to me doesn't really matter. And let's do some stuff about this as we go forward. And it's going to be hard because we got a bunch of fools coming into the administration on a federal level that are going to impact, which is why I asked Mayor Johnson how he and Governor Pritzker are going to stand together with other state officials to keep this fool and his crazy people off of us. As I said Friday to the mayor, not that some of their, a little bit of infighting or whatever isn't important, but what's more important to me is that they can say, all right, let's fix our stuff and let's get out here and fight for the folks that elected us. Yeah, we got issues with all the different things we got issues with. But at the end of the day, right now, I think citizens want to know that these federal fools, part of the Trump administration, aren't going to come to the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago, and wreak havoc. I'd like to hear from you guys in that space. The number is 773-763-9278. We're going to take a quick break and Choose Views. We'll be right back.
It's Choose Views with Richard Chu on WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Hey guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. Thanks for your text messages already this morning. Appreciate you guys throwing me some comments and observations. Shout out to my man, Florida man Rick, for keeping it real and letting us know where he's coming from. I wanted to also let you guys know that we have a guest with us this morning and the 7 o'clock hour, and kind of cool that she's going to be spending some time with us. Her name is Jenny Rowland Shea. She is one of the directors of public lands at the Center for American Progress. So I'm sure she's going to have some thoughts and observations about what we're dealing with, not just with the fires in Southern California, but our lands in general. So I'm looking forward to talking with her later in the show. So she'll be with us in the 7 o'clock hour. All right. You guys have a pretty good idea of where I sit in this conversation around what's happening in Southern California with the fires, but also on a larger scale, on a broader scale, what's happening in general with climate change and how we as Americans have to take this as a real thing. It's not fake, and it's not some way to scare people and this, that, and the other. And, we have to take it seriously because it is serious. And we are dealing with it in a way that I think is inappropriate, ineffective. It's too much in a state of denial. And so that's where I stand in this conversation. I am a believer that our climate is having some serious issues, and we have to make sure that we spend the time, the resources, all that we have to slow down the effects of climate change. And that's kind of where I'm sitting in this space. But as we move forward, I guess you could say as we move forward, as we try to find a way forward, one of the things that I want to do to put a take action mindset on this is helping. And, what do we do to help? And how do we take action? And this is the same part of what I had said when we had the disasters with the weather in the central and southeastern part of the country. So I wanted just to take a little bit of time this morning to talk about this is a part of how we all can be. We may feel helpless. Los Angeles and Southern California is far, far away. That's out there. How do I do? What do I do? Is there anything I can do? And in my mind, there's always something you can do. And you've heard me say this before. It's a phrase that I've sort of gleaned from professional and business coach Mel Robbins, which is, if you can take action, you don't have a problem. So in this space, what I would like to be able to do is offer a little bit of help, a little bit of suggestions in terms of taking action to help, just like we said when we saw this happen in the Southeast with the flooding. And unfortunately, we're probably going to have to be in this space again until we get our arms around and so really have a conversation about climate change. So if you are one that wants to help with what's going on in Southern California, one of the first groups that you should reach out to is the American Red Cross. Okay. That's an easy one to find by Googling and determining what they would recommend you do. Sometimes you take action on certain things and you end up not going in the best of directions. Still taking action is important. So one of the actions that I would recommend for everybody is to reach out to the American Red Cross and find out what resources that they can use. I know that even in my own life, I've thought about just ordering some cases of water and other supplies and having them sent to the various fire departments and so forth. But maybe the first thing we all should consider doing is contacting the American Red Cross. Start there. And if you want to get more specific with other organizations, the World Central Kitchen, that's founded by Chef Jose Andres, is mobilized in Southern California to provide sandwiches and water throughout the region. And they can use volunteers, and they probably can use some dollars. The Los Angeles Fire Department Foundation, and they are also a direction that you can go. This helps, obviously, with the firefighters. They go toward equipping firefighters with tools and supplies when it comes to these kinds of awful situations. The Los Angeles Regional Food Bank is accepting food donations and volunteers as well. The California Fire Foundation, they're working with local fire departments and community organizations to help residents who were impacted financially. The California Community Foundation is also, they're working and will be working to help with folks in terms of clearing away debris in the process of rebuilding homes. The Anderson Munger Family YMCA in Los Angeles is seeking donations of food, snacks, water, and essential and emergency supplies. The Y said that they're said on Instagram that they are accepting deliveries at its Koreatown location. So again, this is one you can Google, the Anderson Munger Family YMCA. The International Medical Corps, the Los Angeles-based International Medical Corps has been coordinating with local health groups to deliver relief supplies. Hygiene and first aid kits are a big part of the request. Direct Relief is an aid group that's bringing in emergency health care supplies to communities and clinics that help with the evacuation and where people have to go. Also, N95 masks and hygiene kits are a part of what they're supplying and may need some support there. The Best Friends Animal Society, which runs pet adoptions centers in West Los Angeles, so they can use donations in terms of folks with pet animals that have been impacted by the fires. So I just wanted to read off a list of things that I had found that I felt that you guys should hear, as much as I'm, taking the position with regard to climate change, taking the position with regard to what's happening here, happening there in Southern Cal, but also happening in other parts of the country. Start with the American Red Cross and see what they need help, where they need help. There's still people that are suffering from what happened with the flooding that took place last year in central southeastern part of the country. But this is obviously, no pun intended, the hot spot in terms of where a lot of our attention is focused as a country. And with our show and our station here, WCPT, we want to do what we can to provide as much information and access for folks who want to help and not feel powerless. That's the thing that I try to address when it comes to a challenge. Is, sometimes folks feel powerless and they feel sad. And then what happens is you kind of go inward and you physically become ill because of the fact that you see this, and you may know somebody. I've said before, we're probably all in some way 2 to 3 degrees, maybe 6 degrees of separation from somebody that's being impacted by this. That's why I've been so passionate about it, but also connecting it to the larger conversation is what we have to do as progressive liberal Democrats. I'm passionate about it because I've got friends and family and business associates, college colleagues, and all the rest that are impacted by this directly. So I don't want to overstate that with you guys, but I also want to make sure that if you're desirous of doing something to help and be a part of the solution, those are some groups that hopefully you guys can reach out to. But start with the American Red Cross because they've got a dotted line to pretty much every organization you can imagine when it comes to disaster relief. If you're looking for this list again, hit me with an email and I will send it to you. in a Word document so that you can have that readily available to be able to do something and to take action. And as I've always promised you, I'll do my best to keep you informed. Devin, before we go to break, let's grab a quick call. Let's go to our man, Florida man, Rick. Hey, good morning, sir. What's going on?
Hey, good morning, Richard. Really quick, you're talking about how this global warming is impacting people around the country, and it is impacting you there in Chicago.
Yep.
And it was very alarming to me. I've been here in Florida now, defrosting for 30 years, but I did go back to visit during the winter, and I can tell you I have never seen it when I was a young man, where it would snow 3 feet, and 3 days later it would be gone.
Yep.
I was living up in the Waukegan area, Lake County. I was working up there, living up there, right up against the lake, about 3 blocks away from the lake, and it should have been bitter cold. And I was seeing green grass in January and February. And think back when we were young men, everybody in Chicago that can hear me, you think back and you remember how that snow would not melt until spring.
Hey.
And then it would... And it would be pushed up against and off in a corner somewhere, and it would go black from the soot from the cars, and it was just there.
Hey Rick, here's a visual that I know you can tap into. Remember what a parking lot would look like it was stacked with snow from all the plows in the neighborhood having pushed snow into a parking lot because they figured, okay, that parking lot's probably not going to be needed for a while, and that's where so much of the snow would be.
And when you would drive to work, and when spring was right around the corner, you would watch that snow gradually go down and lower and lower, and you would say, "Oh God, oh thank God, it's coming soon. Spring will be here."
Yeah.
Oh,
yep.
And you'd be huddled, and now it's. And when I went back, I was back up there 2013, 14, and 15, and I was teaching up there.
Uh-huh.
And I would talk to people I would know, and it was as if people had amnesia. And
yep.
It's alarming. It's alarming to me. And also how in Waukegan, I don't know about the rest of the state, but they were talking about how because this was happening, there was some sort of parasite in the trees that was not being killed.
Well, listen, here's again, I'm not going to play scientist here, but I am going to talk about the things that I've read. To your point, and I know about the parasite, but what I do know is that the difference in bugs, mosquitoes, wasps, bees, all of these that are considered a pain in the behind, those insects, those bugs, if you will, their proliferation has decreased dramatically in the last 20 years. And the scientists will tell you that's one of the first things that they look at when it comes to climate and environmental change. So tying this to what you just said about snowfall in the upper Midwest, not just in Chicago, but the upper Midwest, I've said this before, which is why, I appreciate where you're coming from. All you got to do is look at the snow, the amount of snow, but also how long the snow stays on the ground. And a lot of people don't go to that second level of what you just said, Rick. How long does it stay on the ground?
Right.
And so I am in that same boat with you. We're sitting in a different part of it because it's a big boat. But we do have to get this conversation. We have to have this conversation regularly about.
Yes, we do, and wake people up more. I mean, I just found it alarming how it would snow, and I didn't bother to shovel because I knew within 2 or 3 days it would just. It would all just. I had a black top driveway, and it would just catch the sun, and it would warm up and just melt away, and then it would melt off of the lawn. Yeah. And I'm looking at green grass in January and February. That's alarming. It should be bitter cold. We all have no jokes about this, people. We can't laugh this away any more than this is a natural disaster that is happening to us, and it's in slow motion, but it is still happening. we've got to figure out what action we're going to take.
Right on,
We
Rick.
got to we got to go after these. I'll just say one last thing. We all know this, but it needs to be said again and again. It's these corporations that are benefiting from this. You cannot find one social ill. I challenge you, Chicagoland. You cannot find one social ill that a corporation does not benefit from. Think about that. And I'll leave you with that one, Richard. And thanks for all you do.
All right, man. Be safe and good to hear your voice. Take care, okay?
Thank you. You too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
I know. Let's take a quick break, guys. 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we'll be right back.
It's Choose Views with Richard Chew on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, guys. Welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. So I came across a couple of interesting things. A clip that Devin and I put together, actually two clips that we put together, and they're both from MSNBC. And some of you may have heard or seen one of them. A lot of you commented. I had a few hundred people comment in a matter of hours on a post that I put out on Friday, and I've been waiting to get this to you guys today. Both of these clips are really strong, and something that Rick just talked about in terms of corporations, in terms of where our country is as it relates to how corporations have impacted some of the negative things that are happening to our environment. That's a fact, guys. You know, the data's out there. You don't have to believe me. Do your own research. But I'm pushing you to do just that. But one of the social scientists on MSNBC talked about this in terms of where we are with not just corporate inequality, but inequality in general, and what we're on the precipice of seeing a lot more of, and why we've got to stand locked arms to fend this off, certainly over these next couple of years. So Devin's gonna hit you guys with this, what I call truth about inequality.
Once you get above a certain level of wealth, you get no incremental happiness. So why on earth would you not go back to a tax policy of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where, say, above, pick a big number, 10 million, you actually pay more than 10%, maybe more than 20%, maybe more than 50%, because the difference between $30,000 a year for a household and $50,000 is enormous to the well-being of that household. Low-income kids in low-income households have higher resting blood pressure, but the difference between making 10 million a year and 15 million a year offers you no happiness. But these individuals have weaponized government, and we risk revolution, whether it's CEOs being murdered in the street, whether it's a Me Too movement that had righteous components of it, or Black Lives Matter. What are these movements? They are targeting the wealthy. We are in the midst of a series of small revolutions to correct income inequality. And the reason we put an insurrectionist and a rapist in office is because for the first time in our nation's history, a 30-year-old man or woman isn't doing as well as his or her parents were at 30. Why? Because the majority of households are having the oxygen sucked out of the room, such that a small number of individuals and a small number of companies can be worth more than nation states. Income inequality is out of control. Our tax policy has gone full oligarch.
So, kind of tying back to what Rick said about the impact of corporations on our environment and on our communities in general. That's a fact, guys. It just is. You don't see any individuals getting sued for polluting waters. I don't know of a case yet, Devin, where an individual. Listen, let me be clear for those who are saying, might be thinking this. I could be wrong. I'm totally pro-business. I'm totally folks making all the money they can make and having all the largesse that they can make. I am not against, philosophically or literally, wealth, income and wealth in the country. I'm not against that at all. I'm totally for it, in fact. Without a doubt, unapologetically, I'm totally for it. And a rising tide lifts all ships. So I'm also for making sure that we raise, because let's be honest, guys, you know, none of these guys are some of them are. I don't want to say none. I was about to say none of these guys and gals are rocket scientists. Some of them literally are. Okay. Or nuclear engineers, as the former President Carter was. But my point is, none of the businesses that are out here in our society would be a damn thing or mean a damn thing if it weren't for the community of individuals and consumers. You know, you have a product, but if you don't have people to utilize that product or service, then you kind of doing up a rope. And I won't say those words, but you get the graphic. So we are the core to our American success. We as individuals are the core. And so let's overlay that in the conversation around business. I want all businesses to succeed and have prosperity and the largesse. Absolutely. But I want, if not first, to see wages from folks increase. And not have to have a conversation and debate about we can't raise the everyday wage and the middle class wage it's not Darlene. It may be Darlene. I could be wrong. But one of our callers has said, what about the working poor? I'm right in line with that. Let's change that. We shouldn't even have a working poor. We should be able to say, you know what, we're going to spread this wealth. We're not going to have, because this is what's happening. If there's too much at one end of something, eventually it's going to tip over. And then just to give you the visual, if you have all this weight at the top of something, eventually it's going to fall over because there's no foundation. Pretty simple, right? Pretty simple physics. And so that doesn't mean that the bottom can't be, that the top can't be large. It also means that the bottom has to be large and has to be a foundation. Foundationally increasing the income of Americans is going to make our country a stronger country. It just will. All the economic math is out there to prove that to be true. And the sociologists that spoke on MSNBC that talked about where we're potentially headed, let me just break this down for you this way. We had a CEO get shot in broad daylight in the streets of Manhattan. Over what? The inappropriate use of the resources of a company when it comes to denying claims for insurance. That's what happened, y'all. You can see what happens is a lot of times people get off in these, sidelines. At the end of the day, and my brain does that too, so I don't want to finger point. I've done that and I do that as well. However, that's literally the reason that this is breaking down to be. He got shot and he got killed, assassinated, whatever, because someone took it upon themselves to say, I'm done. I'm going to risk my life. As crazy as this may sound, his mind said, I'm going to go do this. And he did it. What's happening right now with the fires and with our weather patterns and what insurance companies have done and will probably continue to do, some of them, and we know the big name on the table right now is State Farm. I'm not going after them. I'm just saying the facts. There's some people that are going to be unhappy about this, already are. I'm not making a prediction. I'm just talking about where people are and how this is a conversation that folks just don't want to have. There are big companies that are denying claims in the insurance space. There are big companies that are poisoning water. Individuals aren't doing that. There's no company. Name me a cigarette individual that's been sued for the harm that its product that it causes to the community. Is there an individual? It's the companies that are. So we have to be able and we have to be willing. We already are able, but are we willing to talk out of both sides of the conversation? Not out of both sides of our mouths, but out of both sides of the conversation. Companies that are great have a greater responsibility to continue to do great things. And the one and two things that they have to do, one is to make sure that the people who work for those corporations are properly remunerated across the board in their compensation that's regular, in their compensation that's considered bonus and in addition to for performance and excellence and all that, in terms of their medical care, in terms of their livelihood care. And what I mean by that is when people have some issues that have to be dealt with, that the company gets behind them to do that. And it also has to make sure that people who work for corporations, work for businesses, have the wherewithal and the means to reasonably and respectfully walk away, i.e. retire. if companies don't do that, and if we as a society don't get back to demanding that, that's where we're going to see some unfortunate happenings like we saw in New York, because folks are tired. And when we see what the huge tragedies with our weather patterns and our climate change, people are going to respond to that. And I'm not even afraid to talk about it. Why would I be? I'd be hypocritical. We have to talk about it, so it's going to start with me. We have to be willing to have that fight. And if we don't, then respectfully, we have ourselves to blame. Now, I'm not being a jerk in saying that. I'm just saying it from an inspirational standpoint. We have to be willing to have that fight. So I'll jump to the deep end of the pool first. But for now, we're going to take a quick break because we have a wonderful guest that will be joining us in the 7 o'clock hour. Stay tuned, guys. We've got Jenny Rowland Shea that will be with us in the 7 o'clock hour. 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we will be right back.
Welcome to Choose Views with Richard Chew.
Get ready to dive into a world of insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions.
As progressives, our job is to have an all-inclusive, full-on assault with all of our players.
A show that will focus on moving our political, social, economic, gender, and cultural conversation forward.
And all of our players means all of our players.
It's Choose Views. And now, here's your host, Richard Chew.
Hey, guys. Welcome back to Choose Views. 7 o'clock hour, 773-763-9278. Glad to be with you. Of course, I love smart people, and I call myself a fairly informed dude. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily a smart dude, but fairly informed and seeking more information all the time. But every now and again, you run across a person who's truly smart that has, what we would call that great resume. And in that space, we have with us this morning Jenny Rowland Shea, who is the Director of Public Lands for the American Center of Progress, and of course has been around a bit. I don't want to talk about that from an age standpoint, so Jenny, don't get upset with me, but just the work that she's done in terms of making sure that people are aware of what happens in and around our public land. So welcome to the show this morning, Jennifer Rowland Shea, also known as Jenny. Good morning, Jenny. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. What an introduction.
Well, you deserve it. I mean, my goodness, the work that you've done, you've been out there making sure that folks are aware of what is important when it comes to our public lands. And I'm proud to have you with us this morning, and particularly given what's going on right now politically and certainly socially and environmentally. Tell us a little bit about what you're currently working on, and candidly, I'll just jump right in the deep end of the pool. What are some of your bigger concerns right now, more broadly with the environment?
Yeah, so the things I'm working on right now, we have about one week left of the Biden administration, and I work on conservation issues, and they are really, plowing ahead to get everything done that they can and protected in the time that they have left. And so working to help communicate and get those things over the finish line. And then obviously we'll be in a new world again in about a week and with the Trump administration. And so kind of preparing for what might come with that. But just over the past couple of days, the president has made some big announcements on withdrawing offshore areas from oil and gas leasing, protecting new areas.
Some 600, so how many? Really, 650, really 650. What was the number? I had it in my notes and I left that sheet at home. A large amount of basically it's off the table drilling, and that's huge. We talked about it a little bit here. I got to ask you. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You were going to comment on that.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, last Monday, the president used his power under the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act to withdraw 625 million acres of ocean from oil and gas drilling.
Man, That's just, first of all, that's a large amount of land, and but more importantly, it's a major statement in terms of how important that is, not just in terms of an act of defiance toward the next administration, but how important it is to our overall safety as it relates to both land and the environment. You were part of an article from 2023 that I read about the oil and gas industry being behind offshore wind misinformation. Those are fancy words for regular folks, but take a moment, if you could, Jenny, and explain sort of the meaning behind that article, but the broader message regarding how winds do impact our environment far more than people realize.
Yeah, I mean, so we have the oil and gas industry, which is very powerful. They, over the past several years, have really had record profits, and so they have a lot of money to spend. Basically, they spend it on things that help make them more money. And one of those pieces we found is spreading misinformation. So if you've ever heard these kind of headlines about whales dying, or even the President-elect Donald Trump likes to say that there are these just pieces of wind turbines that are old and decaying off of our coasts. These are not true, and they kind of spread like wildfire because they seem outlandish, or they seem like they could be true or really devastating if they are. But we did some research saying, where are these things coming from? How are they making their way into the news? And found that it's really these nonprofits backed by oil and gas companies that are spreading this information that's not true. And so, I think just as we always should, but keep an eye out on these facts and to see what really are facts, because that is something that the oil and gas industry is putting out there when, if we think about energy independence, we want energy coming from all over the place, and especially new renewable energies like wind that has been just getting going offshore in the past couple of years in the United States, but doing really well. And I think that's something that's definitely under risk in this next administration.
Well, and thanks for kind of clearing that up. And that's a topic that I'm not an environmental scientist by any measure, but I look at some of the things that are natural tools that we have to allow our environment to be in better shape. And so the question I have had recently being, let's say, the last 5 to 7 years, is people were saying, well, the best source of energy for the country, if not the planet, is nuclear. Where do you sit in that conversation?
That's not something that I work on a whole ton. I know that right now, there has been the Inflation Reduction Act that was just passed, had a lot of money in it for both solar and wind, which is a little bit more where I work on. In our public lands and waters, we have offshore wind, and then onshore on our public lands, we have wind and solar, in addition to, lots of fossil fuels, coal, oil and gas. And it's really been a shift in over the past administration of those lands and waters being primarily used for oil, gas, and coal, and really now looking to new renewables, primarily hydropower, solar, and wind. And so that's more in the realm of what I've been looking at. And I know nuclear is out there as well as folks are considering, but it obviously has its risks.
Yeah, I think the last sentence that you just made makes the moment for me, is that it has an incredibly high risk when we have other tools that are equally, if not more effective, but most certainly less tragedy driven if something goes sideways. And And so that's I just wanted to get your quick take on that, and I appreciate your saying what you know and saying what you don't know. So that's always a measure of a person who's smart enough to say that's not my pool.
You aren't going to have a wind spill or a solar catastrophe necessarily. So those are much more reliable pieces of energy that we know don't have a ton of downsides. And are becoming more cost competitive every day. And so, I think that really, for a lot of people, makes sense as the energy future.
Well, and we have wind everywhere. I mean, let's be, I can say this and not want to put words in your mouth, that one of the factors that made the storms in the Southeast a few months ago so much worse was the impact of wind. Now, this is taking I'll say the negative side of wind, if you want to call it that, but and then the fires in Southern California are being, perpetuated because of the impact of wind. And even now, the reason that so many people are now heightened again is because the winds are kicking up. And so that's I guess you could say the negative side of wind. But the positive side of wind is captured properly. You're the expert here. It has huge impact on our environment.
Yeah, and mostly the impact of harnessing that power is, offsetting other types of power coming from coal or gas or oil that has real effects on both the environment and on people who live near where drilling occurs, who live off of the coast where there could be an oil spill, who, live near processing plants for oil and gas that all suffer the pollution consequences from using that, whereas these same consequences or same air quality consequences don't happen when you have, say, a wind farm.
Right. Talk a little bit about, Jenny, if you can, sustainability, urban sustainability, green spaces, big buildings in downtown. I mean, we're in Chicago, big third largest city in the country. But let's talk about urban sustainability. Let's talk a little bit about, how green spaces can have such a positive impact on big metropolitan areas.
Yeah, they are really important. And obviously they're, the terms of conservation, we talk a lot about like national parks and these big protected areas, which are obviously very important. But even more so important, I think, are these areas that are really close to where people live. And a lot of that is in cities. I live in Washington, D.C. And so I know full well how, beneficial it can be to just have these nearby places to go outside, to recreate, but also to know that it is helping with air pollution, it's helping with water pollution, that, a place where there is traffic and cars, that trees can actually absorb and clean the air from that pollution. And so it's really important to have these areas where people can get outside. And we did a study not too long ago kind of looking at also like who has access to these outdoors and found that, low-income people of color have less of these areas that nearby that have so many of these benefits for your health. And so there really is a lot of work still to be done to prioritize these green spaces in urban areas.
We've been, and thank you for that, because a lot of people don't understand, or maybe have not been exposed to, and some have forgotten this thing called photosynthesis, and this thing made you laugh. But let's talk about I don't want to point fingers too much, where our educational system, in a micro way and in a more broad sense, can have a better impact on how we address our public lands and our environment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak for education policy at all. But, I think it is, if you are not, exposed to nature or to this type of learning early on, like it very well could be stuff that you are not aware of, and that's totally reasonable. But, that these green spaces are so important for our health. There's been numerous studies for, air quality, but also just mental health of having trees nearby, having a park nearby to go to for physical and mental health is huge. And so, I think if you aren't exposed to that every day and you don't live in one of these areas where more common out in the West or out in rural areas, you may not be aware of all of the benefits that parks, public lands can provide, but they really, are, the original way to have clean air and clean water.
Yeah. Here in Chicago, we've been noted for the last 8 years now, by Condé Nast Magazine as one of the more clean cities, if not the cleanest city, big city, with a certain amount of population and above. But also our parks systems here are pretty robust, and they are accessible, ironically, to all communities in terms of wealth and income throughout the city of Chicago, which is one of the beautiful things about our city, in addition to our skyline. But also our lakefront has been a big part of the beautification of the city, and to allow for there to be this natural sort of connection between air, water, and land. So I'm really proud of that as part of the city of Chicago. And when we talk about big cities and their need to have more green spaces, what are some of the things that, because not every city can just start going out and planting trees. Maybe I shouldn't say that. I'll back off of that. Jenny, maybe you can tell us, what can some of our bigger cities do to affect the impact of the heat and energy that are generated by big buildings, i.e. have more green spaces?
Yeah. And Chicago is honestly a great example. The coastline is beautiful, and I've been to Chicago, and there are tons of, outdoor areas and parks all over the place. And yeah, I think that's kind of where it begins is with, urban planning, really. And Chicago has prioritized, I believe, green space in some of their planning. So have places like, New York and D.C. also have realized how important this is to well-being of their citizens, and so have prioritized it in those planning processes, which take, years, if not decades, to actually see through. And a lot of those, it's more about ensuring that these green places that are there remain there, right? So it could be easy in some senses to just, have a new, and obviously we have a housing crisis as well. And so these things need balance, but prioritizing that, if you're going to have more people, that these green spaces remain and aren't taken down in favor of something else. There's also, I know, smaller things that cities are working on, which can just be planting trees in tree boxes and things like that. There are also, things that collect rainwater and things like that are green roofs. So there are smaller ways to kind of get greenery into cities as well.
When it comes to that, though, do you, and I'm not trying to have you be necessarily partisan, but I know that you have a perspective about where we are with the next administration. What's the federal government's role? What do you think the federal government's role should be or could be as we go forward with helping metropolitan areas be more green?
Yeah, and so, there are a couple of ways. One, I will flag again, the Inflation Reduction Act obviously had the kind of strategy that was a big climate bill, among other things. And the strategy there is really to provide these grants to communities, to cities, to nonprofits to do some of this work. And so I think that's one way, is just financial help is probably the biggest way, because, cities are in charge of their own spatial planning and that kind of stuff, but through money to just pay for some of these things, because adding green space obviously is not cost free. And so I think that's probably the biggest way. There are also then I would say the federal government has a lot more control over the kind of bigger areas of federal public lands that they actually manage and own. And so I think some of those are within and nearby to big cities. I know there's a national park or two not too far from Chicago. And I think those are the areas that the federal government has a lot more control over what happens on them. And I think that's where you'll see in this next administration kind of what are those lands being used for and prioritized for. And these are, maybe not right in a city, but maybe an hour, 2 hours drive outside of the city. And are they going to be prioritized for development? Or are they going to be prioritized for conservation? And, we've even seen some pretty distressing proposals coming from folks who used to be in the first Trump administration, as well as some kind of special interest groups and senators who are proposing new ideas for the new administration to actually sell off these public lands. And that could be a really dangerous precedent where, that those lands will just be ultimately developed and not set aside for future generations. Because, as I mentioned, really the easiest way to keep these lands is to just keep them as they are rather than have to pay to reclaim or reforest an area.
Yeah. My concern there, I kind of link this to something that I know you've had your observations about, and that's how Project 2025 is going to give, potentially give the oil and gas industry free reign to do certain things from a development standpoint, and certainly misinformation, as we talked about with wind. But as we kind of wrap up, talk a little bit about how you see what Project 2025 could represent to our lands and to our environment.
Yeah, Project 2025 could be very dangerous for our lands and our environment. It includes, as you said, basically free reign for the oil and gas industry. And so we will have to see kind of, how closely President Trump aligns with that, because, public lands and waters are very popular among the American people, and the American people want to see them conserved for their use and their future generations. But, Project 2025 would like to sell them out to special interests. And we know that Trump privately told a group of oil and gas executives that they should raise the money to get him elected and that he could roll back environmental regulations for that. And so, we'll have to see. But these are really pretty extreme proposals to either overturn protections or, just sell them out to big industry.
Yeah. So, Jenny, first of all, thanks for being with us this morning, and I look forward to having you back again because your voice is going to be needed as we navigate through these next 2 to 4 years, 2 with the midterms and 4 with the national and, of course, local elections and states' involvement when it comes to public lands and the environment. But as you navigate in these next few years, what are some of the things that you're going to basically have to gird yourself and be prepared to deal with? And I don't mean personally, but in terms of the work that you do.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the work that I do, I will have my eye on President Trump's desire to drill, baby, drill, and seeing how that plays out in terms of the massive oil and gas lease sales, things like that, and kind of keeping an eye on really who is gaining from these decisions that the president-elect makes and who is losing, because I think that's really going to be the most important part of this is who is President Trump standing with? Is it going to be these anti-park politicians and the oil and gas industry, or is it going to be with American consumers and taxpayers who really rely on these public lands and natural areas to keep them healthy and allow places to recreate?
Wow. Okay. Well, we're going to be here to support you in that effort, and we certainly look forward to having you back, because people don't know it sometimes, Jenny, but they need to hear from folks who are qualified to talk on subjects, not just from a political standpoint, but from the impact on the greater society. You're one of those folks, and I greatly appreciate, and our listeners all over the country appreciate you being with us this morning. I hope we can have you back in the future, and because there's certainly going to be stuff to talk about in the space and the work that you do.
Thank you so much for talking.
Jenny Rowland Shea she's the director of public lands with the American Center of Progress, and I appreciate you being with us, and more power to you guys at the Center for American Progress and all the work that you do. Keep up the good work, and as I say, we got you here. So thanks so much for being with us, Jenny.
Thank you for having me.
All right, have a great day, great week. Bye now. Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't know what more to say than to say what she just said and repeat it many, many times over for you guys. This is important to our greater conversation, and where I started the conversation today about how important our environment is, and we take it, we do take it for granted. And unfortunately, there's, as she so well put it, she's going to be paying attention to those who are gaining and that are losing in this next administration, in terms of the people who are taking advantage of the land for purposes that are they going to benefit the environment or not? Are they going to benefit our public land administration and the administration of public lands or not? And the Center for American Progress and folks like Jenny do great work. So I want you guys to plug in to them. Go to their website, to the Center for American Progress's website. And if you're looking for ways to be a little bit smarter, a little bit more informed, a little bit stronger when it comes to these conversations, that's a place to go. That's a spot where you can go to their website and say, let me click on the drop-down box and find out what it is that they're doing, and how can I be more informed. We're going to do our best to keep having those experts here with us on the show. We're going to take a quick break. The number, of course, is 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we will be right back.
Welcome back to Choose Views with Richard Chu on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. Great having Jenny Rowland Shea with us this morning from the Center for American Progress, Director of Public Lands, well-informed, well-educated, and plugged into what we all need to be hearing and talking about. She's got a wonderful background in that space. So tomorrow we're going to have author Mary Clark with us from Michigan. We'll be also talking a little bit about land and talking about the progress of our society when it comes to preserving not only our land but our environment in general. And she was with us right after the convention, and looking forward to having her with us tomorrow morning. So you'll want to tune into that. So the conversation today by design was to talk about the environment from my perspective as a guy that appreciates what Jenny said in terms of getting out and enjoying the outdoors, enjoying our parks, enjoying here in Chicago, the lakefront, and being able to take advantage of all that with the beautiful skyline that we have, et cetera. But when we get outside of Chicago, I mean, this is one thing that's unique about the city of Chicago. It is a wonderful blend of nature in a metropolitan area connecting to nature in a rural area, or a suburban area and rural area. And that's one of the beautiful things about being in the Midwest. And I would say there's a lot of truth to that in terms of being in places like Minneapolis and other big Midwestern cities that are cold, but are also, part of the beauty of what we have in that integration of metro and suburban and rural. So this is why I wanted to chat about this morning. Circle back to something about that I said earlier in terms of taking action. I've gotten a few comments from some of you guys about getting involved. Yes, take the time to take action to help if you can with what's happening with the fires in Southern California. Not that you can directly help, but indirectly help if you can, as it relates to donating time, money, and resources to the groups that may need their help. And if you guys email me at richard@WCPT820.com, I will send you the list of the organizations that I mentioned that are right there on the ground, that are local, specific, and the Greater Red Cross, which helps not just here, but in any of these areas that are struggling and have had such horrible things happen with regard to our weather. It's a tough one for me anywhere because, we being part of a society that's spread out all over the country, we know somebody. And I said this during the weather tragedy that we had in the Southeast a few months ago. We know somebody that lives there or spends time there that's, 1 or 2 degrees separation from us when it comes to these things. So that's why it impacts us all throughout the entire country. And I want you guys to take the responsibility. I'm encouraging you, if not darn near demanding you, take the responsibility of getting involved and being an advocate for helping, even though it's not in your literal backyard or figurative backyard, I should say. All right, just make me that little promise. Make me that 2025. That's my ask. That's my request, is that you get involved outside of your own community at the same time that you're involved in your local community. And I talked about local, so you can handle your business locally, but also look out and say, where can I also be impactful and involved in other parts of the state, or the city, the state, the county, and the country. That I think is where when I tie this intentionally back to calling out businesses for their inappropriate behavior, that's what I mean when I say we got some work to do. So we have to navigate a few different things right now. We've got natural disasters that are around us. They're happening, and that we have to be mindful of. We've got to be mindful of how we deal with corporations and where they are. Jenny said it best in terms of who's going to benefit, who's going to not benefit, who's gaining and who's losing. That's in our hands. And I know you may not think that it is, but trust me, the minute you start going down the path of seeing, the minute you start going down the path to see what corporations are giving what amount of money and resources to different organizations, you will be shocked and surprised. And so she kind of touched on this a little bit, and I wish we could have talked more about it. It's to see who's gaining and who's losing, and to find out who's behind certain things. Man, it's eye-opening, and it can tick you off when you think that a particular organization is not, when you find out that they might be, a couple of dotted lines away from some organization that's doing some real harm to the country and the environment. So I put that on you guys. A couple things. We want to remain focused and doing what we do on a local level. Absolutely. But put it in your, on your wish list, or on your dartboard. Where is it that I can have an impact outside of my immediate community? I'm going to take Richard's request and not only be helpful get involved in my local organizations and things that matter, but also, and local anywhere in the country that you are, but also where else is it in the country that I can be involved and have impact? What companies do I need to be looking into? Richard maybe gave me a homework assignment a few weeks ago. Take the Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 companies, and you can be busy for the next 6 months researching, 10 companies a week or 20 or whatever a week to see a little bit more about them. So you know who you're giving your money to. I believe that, guys. We have to know. We've waited way too long. And I get that we're all busy. We all have things that are going on and responsibilities and so forth. But we have to be willing to do that work. And I apologize for anybody that's upset that I'm saying it that way. But we have to, if we plan on preserving ourselves now, we plan on being, helpful to this process, to this solution, we got to find something to do. And the things to do start with the local organizations, expand to the regional and national, but also you can do the work of finding out a little bit more about the businesses that are out there that we all have to deal with. but just know a little bit more about where and what. I ask you guys to do that, and I know that, and I just got a wonderful text. Again, at Goods Unite Us is an organization that will let you know. We've sourced that before. Goods Unite Us is a great organization. We've talked about them. All I'm trying to say, and I know I'm repeating myself, and that's by design, is do not feel that you are without power and the ability to affect the situation. Some of it takes a little bit of initial work, but once you get that momentum, you become pretty damn dangerous, and I mean that in a good way. You become someone to be reckoned with, where people have to go, how did you know that? Where'd you find that out? Well, I was listening to Choose Views and Joan Esposito, Live Local and Progressive, and Patty Vasquez driving me home. That's who I was checking them out on WCPT, and they told me to go check this out. And the next thing you knew, I became your worst enemy because now I'm informed. I mean that in the most playful of senses, but I also mean it as a way for you to take action. Seriously. I wouldn't put it out there just to be, a knucklehead about it. The taking action part is so powerful, guys. It just is. So I'm gonna leave it there for the time being because I wanted to talk about the environment a little bit today and talk about how we can have impact and how we can contribute and donate and get involved. And have that be part of what we were discussing this morning. Goods Unite Us is a great group that you can find out a lot of information about a lot of organizations. Devin, let's go to our good friend Victor on the northwest side of the United States. Good morning, Victor, and welcome to Choose Views.
Hey, Choose Views. How do you do?
Good, my man.
Well, we got a few more days of freedom left before President Elon Musk and Ramit Swampy take over the government. And you were correct about climate change and the more frequent disasters and catastrophic and 1,000-year flooding events that are going to take place. And Donald Trump really is shameful and disgraceful for criticizing Governor Newsom and the L.A. Fire Department. When he was president and Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, 2,900 people died during that catastrophic hurricane. And what does Donald Trump do? He goes over there and throws paper towels to people who are suffering, lost their homes, and lost their loved ones. And his response was so catastrophic that he employed an electric company to rebuild the Puerto Rican electric grid, that a company that only had 2 employees in it. And, that's the problem. And it took over a year before they had electricity to all the islands. And his response to, like you said, the COVID epidemic or pandemic was the worst response by any country in the world. We suffered the most deaths from COVID per capita than any other country. We are number 1 in that department, and we are the richest nation in the world. Donald Trump, when the fires or catastrophic event takes place in the country, the first thing that Donald Trump thinks about is not serving the people. The first thing he thinks about is how can I make a profit and how can I get some of that FEMA money. That's the problem with Donald Trump and his, the way he criticizes California. This is shameful and disgusting.
Yeah, without a plan, and particularly, Victor, without a plan of action. I mean, that's the thing. That's why I had to even redirect my thought process and conversation here. I get it from a good source that said, okay, you can as you use your own words, walk and chew gum. I can be critical about what's happening and what the realities are of climate change, but at the same time, how do we go forward? What's the plan going forward? And it was, recommended that I do that, and that's what I'm doing. That's why I said, let's talk about the environment, but also let's figure out what we can do to be involved and helpful. And that's why I listed the organizations in terms of what we can do and how we can be involved. Whereas you look at 34-time convicted felon, all we're hearing is whining and moaning and finger pointing, but not a solution. and not
Exactly.
what is it that we can do to go forward. One of the biggest problems that we're going to have, and Victor, thank you for your call this morning. I'm going to grab another one before we get to our break. Thanks for the call, Victor, and thanks for the information. One of the things I was going to say real quickly, then we'll go to break, is this is, unfortunately, we all know this, but this is where we have to be prepared and we have to be stout, is that the kind of garbage that comes out of his mouth and his minions' mouths are the things that we have to know are going to happen, unfortunately. And this is where the backbone is going to be extraordinarily needed. And I'm here for the fight. So let's take a quick break. The number is 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Choose Views with Richard Chu on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey guys, welcome back to Choose Views. I'm going to grab one more quick call, and then I've got a clip that Devin and I put together that I've been dying to play for you guys. Let's go to Dave in San Francisco. Dave, real quick, what's going on this morning?
Oh, thanks, Richard. Yeah, earlier in the week I mentioned that Trump wants to take American gold and buy Bitcoin with it, and which is, totally electronic. If the electricity goes out, your Bitcoin goes up as a wisp. So the idea that, I've lived through Ronald Reagan's bad economy, Gerald Ford's bad economy, Bush the First's bad economy, the other Bushes. They've all basically created fake numbers. And the only way that the average person survived was to create their own value, create their own jobs. People were selling Sprouts. They were selling bread. They were making burritos as Grateful Dead, travelers. And the idea that we're going to have to do that again, Donald Trump is a slumlord. He's always been a slumlord, and he's going to treat America like a slum. So the only way to beat him is to come up with your own economy and look at your own value.
Yeah, it's true. That's a great point, Dave. Thanks for your call and contribution as always. Stay safe out there, my man. Talk with you soon.
Thank you.
All right. So he's right. That's a concern. And Jenny from I feel disrespectful in referring to her as Jenny. Jenny Rowland Shea from the Center for American Progress spoke about that, or touched on that briefly as it relates to who's going to gain and who's going to be losing. So that's something that she's going to be paying attention to, and we should as well. So listen, guys, there's on Friday, and by now many of you may have seen this, but I want to talk about this as it relates to how we fight and how we fight back and how we stand in our space in as unyielding of a fashion as possible. And I reposted this and I commented on it, and hundreds of people had their partnering comments with me in this space. Michael Steele, who was a former RNC chair, he and I have differences of opinions on things. However, we agree on many times substance, and we both agree that you got to stand your ground and you got to draw the line. And I posted that Michael Steele is back again in my positive column because of the way in which he handled a situation that should be handled like this. So this is a little bit of an extended clip, but I want you guys to hear it. On the back end, I'm going to talk about this as a go forward for all of us. Devin, let's play the Michael Steele clip.
Proper conversation.
Michael, I'm not saying we're walking in a winter wonderland.
Joe, you had your moment. Let me just finish the point.
I know, but
I get that.
Tell us something we don't know.
Well, I'm telling you something that you seem to forget. And so let me make my point. You may not like it, but I'm going to make it. And the reality of it is, I take your civility argument, and you like to say 78 million people voted for Donald Trump. Well, 82 million people voted for Joe Biden.
Right.
And he didn't get that civility that you're talking about from Donald Trump in those 4 years.
Right.
So now the expectation is, because he's won again and he got 78 million people, we all got to be civil to Donald Trump. Well, okay, I'm prepared to be civil.
Nobody said that.
You did.
No, I didn't say it. I did. No, so I didn't say everybody has to be civil.
The reality of it is, you're saying, no. You're using the term civil. I've never used that term. I'm using your term. You put civility on the table.
And you said we all have to be civil. There is a pushback that you have to have.
But Joe.
I'm just talking about Barack Obama.
But I'm just saying, I'm not, fine. I'm not talking about that. My main point is everybody's looking at this from a one-way perspective, how we need to approach Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. How the hell is he approaching us?
Yeah.
Right? The man wants to lock up citizens. The man wants to turn the government against him. How are we to respond to that? Are we supposed to be civil?
Michael, do you think we don't know that?
Doesn't seem like it.
Michael, why do you...
Not you. I'm just saying the
Michael,
broader you.
Why do you feel the need to create false choices?
I'm not creating a false choice. I'm using your words.
You have created...
I'm using you. You put civility on the table.
My words. You took me saying that it's not the end of the world, that Barack Obama smiled and talked to Donald Trump, and you're turning that into that we have no idea what's before us.
No, I'm not.
You will play very well today on Blue Sky and Threads and X. Congratulations.
I'm not playing to anybody. I don't have an audience here. I'm just saying. I don't have a particular. I'm talking to the American people just like you are. I'm using the words you use.
No, you're twisting.
And so I'm not twisting your words. So let me untwist them.
Okay, good.
Civility is a two-way street, as I said at the very beginning, and then you attacked that.
No, I didn't.
Yes,
attack
you did.
That.
You did,
Michael.
You did. So you did. No.
You need to go back and look at the tape.
We can look at the tape.
Okay, so there was a lot there, and then there wasn't a lot there. Joe Scarborough, and to the extent that we could say Mika Brzezinski, showed something that I denoted right out of the gate when I saw this clip. It was the epitome of white male, and to this extent, we'll say white male privilege because he was a dominant voice in that conversation with Michael Steele. It was the epitome of white male. I know more than you. I'm better than you. I can talk down to you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it was the epitome of what I see as the manner in which people will want to talk to you. And all you got to do is hit them with their own words, because when you hit them with their own words, they can't handle that they did say certain things. And that's exactly what Michael did. Michael was a former litigator as well as a former RNC chair. He knows what he's talking about. The one thing I will say, and some of the things that I've disagreed with him on, was context rather than fact. He's part of what built the animal that we have right now, and I've said that before. But the thing that he did there, and he's been doing during Trump's administration, since Trump evolved as a politician, Michael Steele has consistently called out Donald Trump. And in that space, what he also did that I was very proud of is that he did not allow a white man's white male privilege to overrun him. So I'm going to put this in the broader context so that people don't look at this as me saying, Chew, why are you always going to make it about race? Because most of the time it is, or about sexism, or about gender bias, or about nationalism. Let's just call it as it is. What I want you guys to see from that clip and to feel from that clip is the willingness, because you have the ability, but the willingness to call people out on their BS, because it's coming, to call people out on their misinformation, which is one of the things that Jenny talked about from the Center for American Progress. I want to give her props, is to stand in the moment to the best of your possible ways to call out the BS and to use people's words to actually help them understand what they just said or what they're talking about. And I applaud Michael Steele for saying, no, not today. And in the case of civility, absolutely not. Civility is, I've said this to people in my life so many times, it's a two-way street. If you're going to act a damn fool and mistreat Devin, you got to deal with me. And I'm not some badass that's trying to be all that. I'm just saying respectfully, you got to deal with me. If you're going to mistreat people, say things about people, be wrong, be provocative just to be provocative without any substance, you're going to have to deal with smoke. And I want to see us as progressive liberal Democrats be willing. I know we have the capacity, but be willing to stand in the face of the smoke and to provide, to stand in the face of the BS and provide smoke to people that want to play that way. That's how we fight on the environment. That's how we fight on the economy. That's how we fight on social issues, on racial issues, on cultural issues, is to stand in your space and stand on business. And listen, sometimes we're going to get caught off guard, or we're going to have something that catches us and we're 3 seconds. That's going to happen to all of us, but be damn well ready to push back once you gather yourselves. We don't have the luxury to be any other way. And as nice and kind as I am, at the same time, you have to carry that sledgehammer of words and steel, no pun intended, like Michael Steele did, in your spine. He was not willing to let Joe Scarborough talk down to him and speak to him in that way. He wasn't willing to allow it to happen. And I can assure you that when you take a little bit of that kind of energy, you're going to feel good about it. I promise you that. You're going to feel darn good about it when you can tell somebody that, no, not today. That's not. I'm not allowing you to speak to me in that manner, particularly when it comes to where we are in our society. When someone wants to say, well, our lands are fine. No, we've got troubles there. We got issues there. Our environment's fine. No, it's not. We've been dealing with this for decades, and people have just been burying their heads in the proverbial sand. And some of them are people that are on the quote unquote left. So you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared with the action to step to people and say, no, that's not accurate. And when someone says something about this being civil, no. Civility is a two-way street. If someone is mistreating you, it's now time for you to stand up to that. And in this political environment, and I don't care if it's local, regional, national conversations about any of these items, this is where we have to be. The effectiveness is going to only get better the more you do it. Sort of the statement is, I need to get some reps in. A lot of the athletes use that. Well, start getting some reps in, guys. Start getting some reps in when it comes to where we've got to be. So I wanted you guys to hear that clip. If you haven't seen it by now, it's out there. You can Google it yourself. If you want to get it from me, just send me an email and I'll get it to you. And also, if you want a list of the organizations that are out there to help with what's happening with the fires and so forth in Southern California and all the tragedy there, reach out to me. I'll send you the list so that you can have that readily available to be a part of the solution. All right, guys, music's playing. We're wrapping up the show. I'm so thankful to be with you every day. Make sure that you're involved. Take a deep breath, as I always say, and make your life count. We will see you tomorrow.